Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Villanova for our 5th annual Mother Mary Lange Lecture in Black Catholic Studies. I'm Father Kevin DePrinzio, currently serving as Vice President for Mission and Ministry here at Villanova. The Mother Mary Lange Lecture is Villanova's signature event for Black Catholic History Month. In inviting leading scholars to deliver this lecture, this event advances Villanova's ongoing anti-racism work by demonstrating that anti-racism is in fact the work of the Church. It is in advancing this work that Villanova celebrates Catholic blackness and blackness that is Catholic. In naming this event after Venerable Mother Mary Lange, the chief founder of the Oblate Sisters of Providence, Villanova University continues to elevate her cause for sainthood and also honors the Oblates as the first permanent congregation of women religious founded by and for African American women. The university also recognizes the long-standing connection between the Oblate Sisters of Providence and Villanova, which goes back more than 100 years. Once again, our dear and valued friends, Sister Rita Michelle Proctor, Sister Annette Beecham, and Sister Marcia Hall, the new Superior General for the Oblate Sisters, are with us tonight. It means so much to us that you have joined us again this year and brings us closer to Mother Mary Lange. And Sister Marcia and I did vocation work together way back in the day, and so it's great to reignite our friendship. And as we say in vocation director land, once a vocation director, always a vocation director. Mother Lange stands with and among 5 other African American candidates for sainthood on display right here. It is so fitting, as this is also the month of November in which the Church celebrates and prayerfully remembers those women and men who have gone before us, as we say, marked with the sign of faith. Together we are in communion with them and they with us as the communion of saints. In addition to the banners depicting the Church's future African American saints, we also have tonight a framed print of an unlikely Aquilegia, North African saint of Hippo, the portrait of St. Augustine, first unveiled at the 2nd Mother Mary Lange lecture by Father Peter and the artist Vernon Adams. More than a dozen framed prints like this one are displayed across campus, which would make for a good scavenger hunt. Having an unlikely Aquilegia displayed in multiple places around campus allows it to be seen often by both visitors and by the local Villanova community while advancing the university's discourse and thought leadership on St. Augustine of Hippo. I'd like to thank the College of Arts and Sciences Dean's Office, and particularly Dean Adele Lindenmeyer, for once again co-sponsoring this event. Dean Lindenmeyer's office has been our partner since this event's inception, and we are most grateful. Additionally, I would like to give my heartfelt thanks to everyone in the Office for Mission and Ministry, in particular Genevieve Lynch, Bernadette Durkis, and Tia Noelle Pratt, for all of their efforts to make tonight's event possible. Now, just a bit more about this portrait of St. Augustine. Yes, it was Father Peter's desire to have a new portrait that would invite the viewer to consider more deeply Augustine's African heritage. But it was tonight's speaker, with her energy, her tenacity, her perseverance, who took Father Peter's desire and made it happen. Talking with Augustine scholars, most notably Catherine Conybeare of Bryn Mawr College, who was working on her now published Augustine the African, and researching artists, Black Catholic artists, who might be willing to engage this project. Dr. Tia Noelle Pratt serves as the special assistant to the vice president and director of mission engagement and strategic initiatives for the Office for Mission and Ministry here, and teaches in the Department of Sociology. She also serves as the editor of the Journal of Catholic Social Thought at Villanova. A sociologist of religion by training, Dr. Pratt earned her PhD in sociology from Fordham University in 2010. For more than 25 years, she has researched and written about systemic racism in the U.S. Catholic Church and its impact on African American Catholic identity. Dr. Pratt is also the curator of the Black Catholic Syllabus. Her work has been featured in the Interdisciplinary Journal of Research on Religion, multiple edited volumes, as well as Faithfully, Commonweal, The Revealer, National Catholic Reporter, U.S. Catholic, and America, even though that's a Jesuit magazine. We forgive her for that. Her recent book, Black and Catholic, Racism, Identity, and Religion, was published by the University of Notre Dame in 2025, which we will hear more about this evening. It is my honor and pleasure to now call forth Villanova's own Tia Noelle Pratt.
Thank you, Father Kevin. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Oh, that was a very good afternoon. Look at y'all. And you all look so nice. It is a great joy to be with you today. And while that is true, wherever I'm invited to speak, it is an even greater joy to be at home here at Villanova with dear friends, colleagues, and loved ones, especially as we celebrate the Mother Mary Lange Lecture's first milestone anniversary. In our inaugural year, Dr. Erin Rowe stood right here in the Villanova room and spoke to us about Black saints in early modern Catholicism, underscoring that Black people were part of the Catholic Church from the very beginning. In our second year, Father Brian Massengale offered what he called a theological lament, highlighting the pain of racism that African Americans face in the church, including the pain of not having Black Catholic history fully realized and appreciated by the church itself. In our third year, Dr. Maureen O'Connell used her own family narrative to highlight a uniquely Catholic form of anti-Blackness as foundational not only to systemic racism, but also to white ethnic upward mobility. Last year, in our fourth lecture, Dr. Kim Harris showed us that despite, and perhaps because of, so much pain and horror, Black Catholics find joy in faith and worship through music. Her lecture embodied the phrase, "Don't let them steal your joy." Now, despite what some would have us think, Black Catholics are hardly a new phenomenon. Yet, in my early years as a graduate student, I first encountered what I immediately knew to be a myth: the idea that there's no such thing as Black Catholics. In other words, being Black and Catholic are anathema to one another and couldn't possibly go together. Thus, they form what sociologists call a disparate identity. Initially, I was incredulous. I couldn't believe this is what people thought. How did everyone not know what I knew with every fiber of my being? That Black Catholics are not only present in, but pivotal to the experience of Catholicism, historically, contemporarily, and globally. So I set about ending the myth. Yes, little old me. The work that has brought us together today, the work that has resulted in my new book, and is truly my life's work, is to shatter once and for all the myth that there is no such thing as Black Catholics. Our first 4 Mother Mary Lange lectures have led us to this moment and being together in this space and in this time. My life and work embody the joys, tensions, and contradictions of being a Black Catholic woman, including the conviction I feel in rejecting this myth, while also researching and writing through the varied, beautiful ways rage, yes, rage, intersects with my faith, life, and work. Rejecting this myth requires understanding that systemic racism is real. And I'm going to do something you might not expect. I'm not going to spend time belaboring that point. Instead, I'm going to begin with that point already understood. We must understand how the church's systemic racism occurs physically in different locations, especially parishes, yet is not limited to physical spaces of worship. We must understand and assert that being Black and Catholic is an ancient identity that must be affirmed by the broader church. Our time together this afternoon will not allow me to go into every point in the book. I gave myself an hour. And there's food after. I'm not going to keep y'all from the food. But friends, if I've done this right, both this afternoon and in the book, we will bring all of that together in a celebration of Catholic Blackness and Blackness that is Catholic, and crush that myth once and for all. Racism, identity, religion. These three words are the subtitle of my book, yet it is impossible to separate them. They are integral to the book and the work that has brought us together today. Asking me to separate them is like asking me to cut myself, my whole self, my Black self, into thirds. It is crucial that we appreciate how hard Black Catholics have had to work simply to justify our presence in the church when white Catholics have not. For example, in 1989, pioneering educator and scholar of Black Catholics, Sister Dr. Tia Bowman, who you see right there, famously addressed the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, saying, in part, "What does it mean to be Black and Catholic? It means that I come to my church fully functioning." That doesn't frighten you, does it? I come to my church fully functioning. I bring myself, my Black self, all that I am, all that I have, all that I hope to become. I bring my whole history, my traditions, my experience, my culture, my African American song and dance and gesture and movement and teaching and preaching and healing and responsibility as a gift to the church. So let's think about this a minute, friends. Analyses of Catholicism in the US and African American religious experiences are incomplete without the inclusion of Black Catholics. The fact that in 1989, so the students here, that probably sounds like 1776 to you, I get it. But those of us who are old enough to remember 1989, we know that that wasn't that long ago. And the fact that in 1989, after Black Catholics had been in North America for hundreds of years, Dr. Bowman had to make such a forceful case for Black Catholics indicates the extent of Black Catholics' marginalization throughout the church's history. Claiming the centrality of Black Catholics in both of these spaces, namely African American religion and US Catholicism, is a key reason why I wrote this book. Additionally, this book forces the sociological establishment to recognize that for too long, the sociology of race has neglected the study of religion, while the sociology of religion has neglected the study of race. And the book we're here to talk about today compels our sociological establishment to rectify this. In a 1998 television interview, Nobel laureate Toni Morrison reflected on her vast acclaim, readership, and centering of people and experiences who are often ignored in literature, saying, in part, "I stood at the border, at the edge, and claimed it as central. Claimed it as central and let the rest of the world move to where I was." Well, Black Catholics have been on the margins, on the edge, for too long. And so I stand here today, friends, with the book I've written for you to claim the space Black Catholics occupy as central and invite you to join me where I am. With this in mind, I'd like to speak with you about the importance of having space, which I've spoken about many times over the years, but do so today in a new way. I want to speak with you tonight about the importance of having space that is your own and invite us to think about the ramifications of losing that space. So first, we'll talk about St. Peter Claver Church, the first church founded for African American Catholics in Philadelphia. Second, we'll talk about how Black Catholic identity is formed in the space of liturgy. And third, we'll talk about church closings. Sound good? Okay, all right. So, for those of you who know Philadelphia well, you'll recognize this as the southwest corner of 12th and Lombard, also known as St. Peter Claver. And this location, this corner, is just outside of the area that W.E.B. Du Bois highlighted in the Philadelphia Negro at the turn of the 20th century. According to St. Peter Claver's own documented history, the parish began in the late 19th century as a home church, akin to the tradition set forth by the earliest Christian communities in the decades following the crucifixion. In this case, it wasn't persecution by the Romans, but systemic racism and white supremacy engineered by their fellow Catholics that kept this community from practicing their faith in a public forum. At that time, Black Catholics had very few options to worship and practice their faith without the encumbrances of pew fees, yes, fees just to sit in the pew, segregated communion lines, that was perfect, St. Barbara's, thank you, and other forms of marginalization within the church. They initially organized themselves under the name Peter Claver Union. Prior to the parish's founding in 1886, the members of Peter Claver Union had an almost nomadic existence, worshiping at different churches in the area, including Old St. Joseph's, Old St. Mary's, Old St. Augustine, yeah, him too, and Holy Trinity. According to the historical sketch prepared for the parish's Diamond Jubilee, the members of Peter Claver Union, quote, had no church of their own, though there was a considerable number of them, end quote. As mentioned in St. Peter Claver's Diamond Jubilee, the nomadic existence of Peter Claver Union corroborates with the recollections provided by second and third generation parishioners. In interviews I conducted, they said their family members weren't welcome in existing parishes, and if they had been welcome, they would have stayed. Instead, the members of Peter Claver Union, as a community of believers, moved from church to church. Additionally, the nomadic existence of Peter Claver Union affirms sociologist Elijah Anderson's assertion that, quote, certain white spaces were routinely declared off limits to Blacks, end quote. Prior to the parish's founding, the members of Peter Claver Union remained anchored by the gatherings held in the members' homes. Like their early Christian forebears, the people of Peter Claver Union desired a public space of their own for worship. When they didn't have a space, they made one. St. Catherine Drexel, then a young woman who had not entered religious life, offered her support by connecting the members of Peter Claver Union to the priests of the Congregation of the Holy Spirit, commonly known as the Holy Ghost Fathers. It was because of this introduction that Father Patrick McDermott became the pastor of St. Peter Claver on July 29, 1889, which was still a parish without a church. After Father McDermott's arrival, St. Catherine Drexel offered the parishioners of St. Peter Claver the use of a 3-story building her family owned in South Philadelphia. Mass and other services were held in a cramped space on the 2nd floor. However, this solution could not facilitate the growth and long-term sustainability of the parish. As a community of modest means, the members of Peter Claver Union did not have the financial resources on hand to build a church or purchase an existing one outright. So they set to work. In 1891, the Fourth Presbyterian Church of Philadelphia relocated to West Philly, trailing the movement that is the white flight of its members. And so I'm going to pause here a minute and invite us to really look at this picture, because this is not the facade of what we would typically think of as a turn of the 20th century Catholic Church. It's not imposing, it's not stone, and that's because it wasn't built as one. This was built to be Fourth Presbyterian Church of Philadelphia. So, when the Fourth Presbyterian congregation moved into West Philly, its former church at 12th and Lombard was for sale. So instead of waiting for the Archdiocese to hand them a church, the members of St. Peter Claver went out and secured one for themselves. They secured the bulk of the funds for the purchase of the 12th and Lombard property. The people of Peter Claver Union raised $20,000, more than $750,000 today, and put that money towards the purchase of the 12th and Lombard property. Despite this success, they found themselves short of the funds needed to secure the purchase. St. Catherine Drexel and a prominent Philadelphia banking executive provided assistance in securing the remaining funds. Yet, for many years, it was St. Catherine and the banking executive who received the lion's share of the credit. Once the 12th and Lombard property was purchased, there was still another long fight to have the building consecrated so it could be used for its intended purpose. Those descended from those first parishioners of St. Peter Claver that I spoke with for the book maintain that this narrative erases the contributions of their family members, gives credit only to white Catholics, and does not give proper credit to the Black Catholics who did so much to secure a church home for themselves. After the uphill battle to secure a church home, the status of St. Peter Claver would remain tenuous in the decades that followed. Ultimately, by the 1980s, the neighborhood was changing again, and the Archdiocese commissioned a report known as the Sites and Boundaries Report, which assessed the viability of St. Peter Claver. And the report recommended to then Cardinal Archbishop John Kroll that the parish stay open, particularly because by then the school had closed, and the school was no longer a financial drain on the parish. But nevertheless, in May 1985, the parish was suppressed. And that triggered a long court fight that didn't end in civil court until 2017. An appeal filed by the advocates and descendants of St. Peter Claver had then moved the fight to canonical court, where it remains today. So the story of St. Peter Claver isn't over. So the building still stands. It's not used, nor is it usable, but it is still there. And the descendants and friends of its original parishioners are still fighting for its legacy. The story of St. Peter Claver is an exemplar in why telling our own stories on our own terms matters, and why the struggle of marginalized groups to have spaces of their own cannot be taken for granted. As you will see more fully in the book. See what I did there? Telling our own stories ensures that our own work, legacies, and the legacies of our ancestors survive. So over the years, I've talked about how Black Catholic identity is formed in liturgy. But I've never really talked about how that happens until today. So I want to pause again and explain something that we do in sociology, which is something that historians typically don't do. And that is when we're talking about specific places, when we're talking about the people that we interview, we give them pseudonyms. And I did not do that with St. Peter Claver because it was so obvious what church I was talking about. And it was important to make that known. And so I didn't want to insult your intelligence or my own by giving that church a pseudonym. But for all of the people that I interviewed, for the other churches that I named, I gave them all pseudonyms. And what that does is it allows us to think more about the themes and not get bogged down in the detail of place names, and to elevate our thoughts to the themes. So from now on, pseudonyms. So St. Catherine of Alexandria is a parish in West Philadelphia. I took students from my Black Catholics course to Mass at St. Catherine's because I wanted them to see that the themes we discussed in class did not exist in a vacuum. I wanted them to know that these themes exist in the lived experience of African American Catholics. An example of the course themes jumping off the page for my students occurred when we visited several years ago. In class, I discussed the overt racism faced by African American men who wished to become priests in the 19th century, and the consequence of that being the low number of African American priests we have today. So during that spring visit, students stated that even after all we had talked about in class concerning Black priests, they were still startled to see a white priest leading Mass at a Black parish. The pastor of St. Catherine's at the time served as pastor of predominantly Black parishes in West Philly for more than 40 years before his eventual retirement. The students who found this jarring did so for varying reasons. African American students who are not Catholic, but are accustomed to going to church, are used to seeing a Black minister lead the service at a predominantly Black church. My white Catholic students, who are generally unaccustomed to being in the minority in social spaces, realized that they had taken for granted the importance of having a priest leading Mass who looks like his parishioners. But during one of our visits to St. Catherine's, I had an opportunity to observe a baptism. St. Catherine's constructs this ritual to be distinctively and specifically Black and Catholic. The pastor invited parents, grandparents, godparents, and anyone there in the church to gather around the baptismal font. And let's be clear, this was happening during Mass. Baptisms don't always take place during Mass. But this baptism taking place during Mass, it was important because, we're talking about space. We're talking about the importance of space. And Mass is the primary space of worship. And welcoming this baby into the space of the parish during Mass is so important, and it matters so much. And so as part of the baptism, the choir sang the Litany of the Saints. Hearing the Litany of the Saints is not at all unfamiliar to anyone accustomed to attending Catholic Mass. However, the litany sung by St. Catherine's Choir stood out to me and moved me deeply because of its inclusion of African saints, like the martyrs of Uganda, St. Josephine Bakita, Saints Perpetua and Felicity, St. Augustine, and St. Athanasius, as well as saints with close ties to the African American community, like St. Catherine Drexel. Currently, as we've already heard tonight, there are no saints of African descent who were born in the United States or lived their lives of holiness in the US after being born elsewhere, which gives these aforementioned saints added importance. Including these saints in the litany was a specific act of inclusion on the part of the St. Catherine's community. They proclaimed that Black saints are part of the church too. In order to do this, some of the more often heard white saints were sifted out. By doing this, the litany, a beautiful and ancient prayer, becomes an act of resistance to racism. It rejects the notion that the Catholic Church is an ultra-white space by asserting that people of African descent are indeed among the most revered individuals in Catholicism. These saints belong to the whole church, not just its Black members. Yet, it is unlikely to hear these names in parishes that are not predominantly African American. The inclusion of these saints allows the St. Catherine's parishioners to claim saints of African descent as central to their practice of Catholicism and invite other parishes to join them there. This embrace of Catholic Blackness resists the notion that only white saints are worth mentioning, making the Litany of the Saints an act of resistance to racism and toward racial justice. I didn't tell you about the chart. Sorry. Okay, so as I visited parishes and we looked at the aesthetics, looked at music, looked at the homilies, looked at preaching, it occurred to me and it became clear that there are three general styles in which Mass happens, what I called traditionalist, spirited, and gospel. And there are some differences here which are outlined in the book about how that is different. And so, quantitative sociologists, they have charts all the time. Qualitative sociologists like me, we rarely have charts. So this chart, isn't it pretty? It's such a pretty chart. So, whether it's a gospel mass, whether it's a spirited mass, whether it is a traditional mass, it is still Black, it is still Catholic, it is still authentically Black and truly Catholic, as the Black bishops told us so long ago in their one and only pastoral letter to date. So, So losing one's church home is an incredibly painful experience. I've been through it, and I know others here today have as well. The pain doesn't get easier if it happens again. The section of West Philadelphia where I grew up had 10 Catholic churches during my childhood. Of the 10 churches that were open just in my corner of West Philly, 80% are gone. There are many who have gone through the pain of church closures multiple times, And this is just in one part of one section of Philadelphia. There are other sections of the city, as well as other cities, that have had a similar experience. In the course of my conversations for Black and Catholic, those I interviewed talked about a number of churches that aren't around anymore. In my conversation with one woman, we talked about 6 churches in West Philadelphia that are gone. In an hour-and-a-half conversation, we talked about 6 churches that aren't there anymore. When the churches are closed, what happens to the people? Where do they go to Mass? Do they go to Mass at all? What happens to the buildings? I mean, we've seen just with St. Peter Claver what can happen to the buildings. So I go into more detail on these questions in the book. And if you'll see in the back, I include the documentation because I figured some people weren't going to believe me, so I was going to put the papers in there. But for now, I'm going to speak a bit about how the loss of these sacred spaces is experienced. We have to assume that each time a church closes, some of its parishioners do not move on to the next church. The decades-long process that led to 10 churches becoming 2 has inevitably resulted in a loss of parishioners in just this one area. One person I interviewed belonged to one of these churches after his conversion to Catholicism as a preteen. He said of the loss of his church, the move to the next nearest church, and the move to a third church once the second one closed. He said in part, quote, "A lot of parishioners came over, but you had a big dip of how many people from the original church came. I don't know. I don't know if these communities could deal with another set of closures." And yet, another set of closures is always on the horizon. A pastor I interviewed passionately reflected on the decision-making processes by archdiocesan officials thusly. First and foremost, someone has to say, okay, put all your business models away. Let us go see the life of the parish. Let us look at the life of the parish, not numbers, not reports, because the first goal of the church is the salvation of the people. So let's see about these people, and then actually come up with a comprehensive plan that says our goal as a church is to maintain the presence of the Catholic Church in this neighborhood, end quote. Focusing solely on a corporate model is not in keeping with Catholic social teaching's call to ensure the common good. Sometimes, it may be the case that closing a church is in keeping with the common good. There certainly are neighborhoods that have a glut of century-old, underutilized churches, and closing 1 or 2 may allow the rest to thrive. However, understanding the spiritual and pastoral needs of the community vis-a-vis the metrics articulated by the pastor I spoke with, along with the clear communication and transparency, is a way to do that while ensuring the church's long-term presence in a community. That is promoting the common good. Okay. This afternoon, I've reflected with you on ways that space is important, specifically when a large, long marginalized group claims space as central. The members of Peter Claver Union didn't have that, but fought hard to get it. And their descendants fought and are still fighting to keep it. The parishioners of St. Catherine's literally called the church's Black saints into their space in an act that is both beautiful in its resistance to racism and radically compelling in its orthodoxy. We've also seen how the grief experienced when sacred space is lost is palpable. Whether in parish life or in campus life, we cannot ignore the importance of the space we are in or not in. That is why having Villanova's signature event for Black Catholic History Month and one of the university's signature spaces matters. That's why campus spaces like the suite matter. Because if we lose them, after fighting so long to get them, the sacrifices for so many will have been in vain. We live in a time where so much that we hold dear, so much that we worked so hard for, is under threat. Fighting that threat has the potential to eat us alive, but we must resist. We must resist that threat. And so, friends, as our time together concludes, I want to leave you with one final reflection. I've spent my entire adult life doing the work which has led to this book, and it's taken its toll. That's why it took me 10 years to finish. But I don't think I would have finished if I hadn't been in this job, at this university, at this moment in its history and in mine. And for that, I'm deeply grateful. I received some gentle critique for the last line of the book, which I'll share in a minute. But the ending of the book only exists as it does because I am here at Villanova in this job. It reflects how being here has allowed me to grow, evolve even as a sociologist, as a scholar, and as a Black Catholic woman. But it's not over. There's still much to do, both administratively and as a scholar. I think I have 2 more books left in me, I think. And when it's all said and done, if those who are called on to reflect on such things can say, she only wrote 3 books, but man, oh man, what 3 books they were. I'm fine with that. I truly am. So the book, as well as our time together this afternoon, has been an exercise in what I call sociological vulnerability. It lays bare my intellectual position as a scholar and sociological thinker, as well as a Black Catholic. My intellectual as well as personal values are here for you to see. Some sociologists will claim that this is the antithesis of what we stand for, but I say it's the opposite. It is essential to make clear the choices we make in what we study and the scholarship to which we dedicate our lives. The calling that is my scholarly work demands that I speak truth to power. That is how we shatter myths. But without me saying anything of the sort, many have told me that they see my critique of the Roman Catholic Church comes from a place of love and a place of hope that things can be better. I think that this is true. I certainly want that to be true. But in the end, that is for Jesus to decide, not me. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Hello. Oh, good afternoon. My name is Shaylin Cothran. I'm a graduate of Xavier University of Louisiana, which is the only Black Catholic university in the United States. Who Villanova, through its work in anti-racist work, has developed a relationship with Xavier. So I bring greetings from Xavier, and I'm also a student at Yale Divinity School, where I just had a book discussion on your book at St. Thomas More just 2.5 weeks ago. And so one of the common things that came up was that people appreciated that you gave them the language to talk about the experiences that they had. in the Catholic Church. And I thought it was unique that out of everyone in the room, which it was a well-attended event, which I was pleasantly surprised, but I was the only Black American Catholic. Everybody else was Haitian, Nigerian, Ghanaian, there was Brazilian, Catholic, but even still, the language applied. And so my question is about you as a writer, and even like you speaking here, I've learned more, even though the content is the same from what was in the book. But my question is about, what is your process for writing? What does it look like? Where are you at? What do you need? And how do you know, like, when you're in the zone, that what's going on intellectually is being reflected in the writing?
Oh, thank you. Is this still on? Thank you. Okay. So thank you for that wonderful question. I'm rarely asked about my writing process, so this is wonderful to be able to reflect on that for a moment. It took me a long time to develop a writing process that actually works, but part of that is a few key things. Writing in the morning works better for me when my mind is fresh and I haven't had, the 500 emails that I get a day haven't come down upon me quite yet. So writing in the morning, setting a specific time, putting it on the calendar, considering that an appointment, a meeting with yourself and your writing that you are not going to miss. And so that's the key part. If you can do that, and a lot of people think, especially graduate students think this a lot, that you need these huge chunks of time in order to get anything done. No, because those huge chunks of time do not materialize. And it took me a long time to realize that they do not materialize. You know what does materialize? 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. That's what materializes and can materialize every day. And what has worked for me over the years is to set aside 5 days a week for that. And then if something happens, because something always happens, you have 2 other days in the week to make up for it and still have your 5 days. So that's one. So that's your first question. So your second question was about how do you know when you're in the zone? So I know that I'm in the zone when I don't actually want to stop. Because one time, President Obama was asked if he enjoyed writing. And he said he enjoys the result of having written. And I thought, oh, this is somebody who is a writer. And when I get to the place where I don't want to stop, that's when I know I'm in the zone. That's when I know that I have figured out exactly what it is that I'm trying to say, and I'm able to say it, and hopefully able to say it clearly. A couple weekends ago, I was at a conference, and there was a conference panel about the book, and dear friends and colleagues that I've known for many years responded, and I responded to them, and I began with, well, welcome to what it looks like inside my head. So in order to get that out, setting aside time in the morning, being consistent with that time, doing that 5 days a week, and being in the zone is when you don't want to stop because you're almost done. So thank you. Thank you for that great question.
Hi, good afternoon. Why did you take Mary Lange and not Talton? I know St. Augustine Institute is pushing Talton for becoming saint, but why did you choose Mary Lange specifically?
Well, the answer to that question, it may not be the answer that you think it might be. When I came to Villanova in March of 2021, this event was already in the works. And it was already in the works by our former colleague, Dr. Shannon D. Williams. And she was the one who gave the event its name. And so when she departed from Villanova, I took over the management of the event, and we took over the management of the event in mission and ministry. And so why Mother Mary Lange versus Augustus Tolton? That really is a question for Dr. Williams. But I'm very glad. And really, as Father Kevin was saying, part of it, I wouldn't dare to speak for Dr. Williams, but part of it is Villanova's connection with the Oblates, and to be able to uplift that, and to recall that history. I was recently at an event with Dean Lindenmeyer where she talked about recalling and reclaiming history, and that matters. And it is a way for us to acknowledge and uplift Mother Lange's cause for sainthood.
I think I'm now mixed up. I have all these questions in one piece, but I prepared a talk, and in that talk, Dr. T, I mentioned how this is Black Catholic Heritage Month, and how important it is within our Catholic community to celebrate. And I know there's a faction that says get away from ethnicities. Mm-hmm. But I think as an African American woman, religious, I think it is most important that we bring to mind, to the church, of a people who have been pushed back, pushed down, pushed out. While Eurocentric communities did better assimilation. Mm-hmm. So I said, unfortunately, this month is going to be celebrated within Black Catholic churches, and not so much in Eurocentric faith communities. And it saddens me. It saddens me to know that this is still an act of racism. And it saddens me that people do not put the time into knowing us, our holy places, and our holy people that we build up, that we push up. And I say that because it's not only in parishes, it's in religious communities. It is most important that we as universal church recognize our people. When I say our people, I mean all of us, whatever your background is. It is most important to celebrate those people too who have been left behind and were considered a mission. So, I mean, we still have the Negro and Indian collection. Did anybody ever question why, where it's going, what's that about? And also within the liturgy, I would rather have a good homily that puts my soul afire than hear about, last week I talked about my dog. He's come along. Yeah, my dog is now eating cat food. I'd rather have a good homily that hits my soul. And whether black or white, I now go attend a faith community that is 99% Euro-American. I'm the 1%. I don't hear enough of black lyricists' works. I don't hear enough of that. And I'm beginning to wonder, is it because it is too ethnic? What's the reason behind it? But I think we have to awaken ourselves. We have to be awake. And we also have to awaken our faith community. Like for us to go back home and say, oh yeah, I went to this talk, Dr. Tia Pratt talked about black Catholics, in the church, and that's it. But sometimes we have to challenge, and sometimes in challenging, it might not sound nice to the other ear. But truth is truth.
Yes. And thank you. Thank you for that, Sister Mary Catherine. And, Sister Thea talked about telling the true truth. And that's what we are called to do. I think my work is a respond to that call. In terms of, your comments, it makes me think of there's a section in chapter 5 called The Need for a Good Word. And in that section, I talk about people that I interviewed and how they are hungry for homilies that resonate with them, that speak to their experience, something that they can feel it in their soul and take it with them as they go forth from the church and into their week, and that will sustain them until they come back. And the need for that is evident there in the book. It's also evident in the Pew Research Center study. So Pew Research Center did a study that is called Faith Among Black Americans, which was published 2020, I'm gonna say now. Yeah. So I was a consultant on that project, and then from that project is another report called Black Catholics in America. And those are things that are highlighted in both of those reports. And my hope is that knowing that this is there, knowing that this is what we know that people long for in the church, that we can start to have it. But it can't happen if folks don't come to events like this or read books like the book I wrote for those folks too. So, but you're right. We have to continue to push, because if we don't, we're not going to get there. If we're not going to, as I said at the beginning and invoking Toni Morrison, if we don't claim the center and invite others to join us where we are, then it's not going to happen. So thank you. Thank you for that, sister.
Alonzo Baker, St. Athanasius Church. The group that was going from church to church and put the money together to start St. Peter Claver Church, you mentioned that they considered themselves Clavers or Peter Clavers?
So before the parish was officially founded, they called themselves Peter Claver Union.
Why, do you know why they chose that as a name?
Why they chose St. Peter Claver? That actually did not come up, but I suspect that it's because of St. Peter Claver's longtime association with Black Catholics.
And the church opened a few days before it wasn't called the National Black Catholic Congress then, it was called something else. But during the third year of the forming of that organization, the third year was in Philadelphia, and it opened 3 days before that. So did that have anything to do with the Archdiocese or them contributing to open a church at that time?
So that was not in the archival material, that connection was not in the archival material that I looked at, and it did not come up with the people that I interviewed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Pratt. Several of us here in the room are Philadelphia Tolton ambassadors. And we had an opportunity to speak with Bishop Perry, who was the postulator. And we asked what's happening with the Tolton movement on the road to sainthood. And 3 miracles have been presented, and they were scrutinized, and they were not accepted. And so my question is, with Mother Mary Lange, where are they along the road as far as any miracles being offered? And if any of them, because we need the 2 miracles for her to be, for her to be canonized.
Thank you. Sister Marshall?
Okay. Is it on? Yes. Okay. So, just as you said, we've had miracles scrutinized but not accepted. For us, the first miracle is that we are still here after almost 200 years. Unfortunately, the church doesn't accepts only those physical miracles. Something that they can point to. Someone was sick and was cured, and we don't have that yet. So we're always asking people to pray for that. So we're no further along than you are in that respect. I think we're all sort of stuck in that place. I did want to make a comment. As I was listening to you, a lot of emotions came to the surface for me, because even though my church wasn't closed in the sense you're talking about, it was merged, which is another form of closure. And so the church that I grew up in, Our Lady Divine Shepherd, Trenton, New Jersey, the only Black Catholic church in Trenton, New Jersey, was merged with a Polish church. And so the first time I went was a Christmas. And the service that my mother, and they have a gospel, they call it the Gospel Mass. And as you know, as you taught you in your lovely chart, the Gospel Mass is not something that goes from 11 to 11:30. So you, especially Christmas time, you're going to have very lively music, etc. And the people for the Polish Mass were coming in and giving us the stink eye as we were leaving Mass. And then the next Sunday, we were treated to a lecture about how we had to leave on time. So it's been, I would say, a difficult merger and a fight to maintain the identity. In Baltimore, we just lost, 30 churches. Most of them were Black. So at the Mother House, the 3rd Sunday of the month, we have Fellowship Sunday, and a number of the parishioners from those closed parishes come out for Mass. So that's another way of sort of reclaiming a space and being yourself, being allowed to be yourself. Now, this may be too soon to ask this question. The next book. Have you even thought about it?
I have. And so the next book, I don't know if it's going to be the next book, but it's going to be the 3rd book, or it's the 3rd book, but I know it's a book I have in me that has to come out. What I want to do is, I've given it a title already, called The Cornerstone. And it's about how slavery is foundational to Catholicism in the U.S. And so the cornerstone is a play on the words of the scripture, the stone which the builders rejected has become the cornerstone, because the humanity was rejected, and yet they are the cornerstone of this church in this country. But then also the cornerstone speech of Alexander Stephens, the Vice President of the Confederacy, who said that slavery is the cornerstone of the United States. So bringing those two things together. You know, I mentioned Dr. Shannon D. Williams earlier, and Dr. Williams has called in her work, she has said the church was the largest corporate slaveholder in the Americas. And we cannot ignore that. And we cannot ignore that when we look at how Catholicism has grown in this country. And so that is one of the things that I'm going to work at. But I got a lot of projects to work on at Villanova first, or at the same time. We'll see. You can talk to my boss. He's sitting next to you. But thank you, sister.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Dr. Vanessa Gurley Holloway. First, I just wanted to thank you for your research.
Oh, thank you.
I know how daunting that can be, but just listening to you, it made me feel a little traumatized. I've been a member of St. Peter Claver, and to the gentleman's question, perhaps they chose the name Peter Claver because he advocated for slaves, even though he was Spanish. 300,000 slaves he baptized, and so perhaps that's why. But I am a product of West Philadelphia. My church, Our Lady of Rosary, closed. The church where I got married, Our Mother of Sorrows, closed. And so it's
hard.
It can be emotional,
Yeah.
that where you're used to being and growing up and your churches are no longer there. Right now, I am in a primarily predominant Euro-Catholic church, actually here at Villanova. And so it's important that we do make our space known. I typically get involved, very involved. I've been welcomed here, and I just wanted to again say thank you again for your research and just for bringing it to the forefront of everybody that this is an important issue that should be addressed now and going forward.
Thank you. Thank you. And those churches you mentioned were among the churches that I was referencing. You know, when I talked about, you know, the churches just in my corner of West Philly going from 10 to 2.
Hello, Dr. Tia.
Hello.
Dr. Mary. So we know each other, and I know many of you here. I just wanted to lift up one phrase that you used about lifting up sociological vulnerability. And I don't know about the sociological part, but I just want to lift up the vulnerability of even this creating a space in which people are sharing a little corner of your own stories. I feel like we're a little bit in the space of the interviews that you gave and that people were kind enough and willing to talk about. And I want to say, as a white Eurocentric Catholic, that vulnerability was something I only started to learn about 8 years ago when my church in Germantown, which is now the only Catholic church in Germantown, merged with a few others. Some of my friends who were part of that are here. And around the time that I came, St. Catherine of Siena Church, which was funded partly by the donations of Black Catholics who were not allowed to come to St. Vincent unless they sat in the, way back. St. Catherine, or Catherine Drexel at the time, helped to fund that. But there was a weekend when they came, some of them came to the door weeping because the announcement had been made that church, St. Catherine of Siena, would be closed. I was pretty new as actually a returned Catholic at the time. This goes back a ways. And I remember thinking, and now I'm so glad nobody could read the thought bubble over my head. I remember thinking that this was sort of like, well, the Acme, that they have to close the Acme because there's not enough customers while you go to another one. right? I remember thinking this is just a supply-demand thing. I had the nerve to think like that. And eventually, I learned enough to realize what a callous and un-Catholic thing that was to think. And eventually read the book that you all, the third presenter here, Maureen O'Connell, wrote a book of her own, I guess, theological vulnerability, saying, look at the track of my Irish Catholic family. Nobody's a famous villain or hero, but all of them had a connection to redlining or banks' policies that you couldn't apply for a loan there. And the same goes for my family, all of us. So I think until we kind of embrace the fact that you can't airdrop into Easter without going through Good Friday. I mean, all of us. And so I guess I'm just speaking as a white Catholic to thank you for inviting all of us to do that work. So,
well,
yeah.
thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just to follow up on that, and I join with the thanks of everyone here for what you've done and your presentation today. It's really, really wonderful. And just following up on what Mary has said, I think all of this, the comments and the hearing people's stories and insights and listening to people's experience is really a model for what has to happen in the larger church. As Mary was talking about St. Catherine's, because I also was part of the parish that was merged into, part of it is this siloing of people from different racial and ethnic backgrounds so that we don't talk to each other and we don't hear each other's experiences. So, for example, it was only shortly before the merger, a couple of years before the merger, that I learned that St. Catherine's School, which is, less than a mile from St. Vincent's, had outhouses into the 80s. We at St. Vincent's didn't know that. Like, if anybody did, no one was talking about it. And part of it is that we were not in relationship with Catholics within a mile area. There were 4 churches within a mile and a half, totally isolated, not having conversations with each other about, well, what's it like? What's being Catholic like for you? What's being Catholic like for you? So I think what you're raising up for us is some of that siloing. And I'm really moved by this kind of sharing and hearing people's experiences. And yeah, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I do not want to keep folks from the reception any longer than I need to. Do you want to do this part, or do you want me to? I got it.
Are you tired of talking or no? Okay. Well, all right. I can do this part. We can do it together. This is with the song and dance piece that I talked about.
That's it.
Hello.
This is what every day is like.
Every day. And we only get to do it a couple more weeks. But just, again, to thank you, Tia, once again, on behalf of everyone gathered here, but also the Office for Mission Ministry and also the university, what you have done for us since your arrival in March. Was it March?
March.
Of 21, right?
Yeah.
What you have done in these over 4 years now. I told a little bit of the story about how our portrait of Gus got to be, but even what has happened with the Mother Mary Lange lecture, what it's become is because of Tia and her passion, her vocation has come into full. We get to see it fully flourishing, and then also the gospel mass that we'll be having in a couple of weeks in collaboration with Sean McElwee, who directs music, and Matt Verghese, who directs liturgy. We'll be having Cardinal, Gregory, who probably helped get an Augustinian elected pope, will be presiding at the liturgy. But it's really because of your passion. We've all got caught up in the passion, and you've brought us into this wonderful space, and have helped us to become more deeply Catholic in it. So once again, on behalf of everybody here and those that are watching live stream and then couldn't be here, just thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Father Kevin. Thank you all for being here tonight. And don't forget to get your prayer cards on your way out, your Mother Mary Lange lecture prayer cards. And there is a reception to follow. And we will see you next year for the 6th annual Mother Mary Lange lecture. Good night.